Hello and welcome to another fantastic episode of the Fantastic Mr. Podcast as we do another Movies by the Decade. Today we take a look at the highs and lows of 1960s film. So sit back, relax, and go back in time with us to the rockin' 60s. Let's talk about the 60s. The 60s came after the 50s, but before the 70s. That's all I could find out about the 60s. So it's your episode. It's your guys' episode. Sorry, I'm just kidding.
Oh man,
I actually found a lot of cool information, but I'm gonna let you guys start.
I mean, open it up. What do you guys think about? What do you guys envision? What comes to mind first when you think of the era of the 1960s? I mean, for me, I think of the era of the suits still, and then bridging to a more unique fashion style as we get to the later 60s, as people are starting to rebel, and we have the Vietnam War beginning. And I think it's a period of division. And it's a period of
cultural change, societal changes. And when it comes to film, especially, a lot of these cultural shifts are shown on the big screen. And I'm sure we'll get into some examples here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think of a lot of the political steps. I apologize, Justin, I cut you off. But I think a lot of the political material, like John F. Kennedy's assassination, the Cuban Missile Crisis, the
civil rights,
Martin Luther King, the civil rights, the
suffrage movement,
civil unrest,
Cold War continuing, space race,
and just like the kind of like the youth. I don't think the youth, but like younger people becoming more disenfranchised with the United States and the American dream, like, a lot more politically leaning films started coming out, and artists being more vocal about the way they thought the country should be ran, and just the political movements in general, which is kind of
that's true.
Ramped up.
Yeah, a lot of
politics,
rebelling and stuff like that too. I don't know. It's amazing to me, and I know y'all are going a little deeper than what I'm about to go to, but it's amazing how much black and white there still is as far as films go. Because, color TV was around this time.
Yeah.
They didn't care. That's the part of the rebelling, right? It's the black and white TV. At least I like to think so. Not TV, sorry, movies. Because there's a few movies, even in the 70s.
Well, the 60s had the introduction of color TV for the first time. I believe that was 1962. Yeah, 1962. Color TV became a thing.
The TV was also still a big thing. It was hard for, like we talked about in the last decade, that was kind of the introduction to staying at home and watching TV versus going to the movies and still having issues. And from what I read, the 60s was kind of the worst time to try to get people to go to the movies just because of the more convenience of staying at home and all that stuff.
But that being said, there were still a lot of great movies that came out.
Oh, yeah.
And it's interesting because we were talking about this in our last episode about the ratings. The 1960s is when the Hays Code was finally abolished. And so maybe that played into the fact that there was a lot more like experimental and politically leaning subjects in film because there wasn't such a tight grip on the film climate. But what is it? A lot of good movies actually came out, like Breakfast at Tiffany's, The Pink Panther, How I Stopped Worrying, and Love the Bomb. Dr. Strangelove.
Yes, I just watched that.
A few dollars more, like a lot of great westerns, a lot of Stanley Kubrick actually put out some bangers in the 60s too.
Bangers.
Put out some sweet stuff. Like
2001.
Lolita was the 60s. 2001, The Space Odyssey.
Dr. Strangelove.
60 was a hot decade for Kubrick.
Well, Alfred Hitchcock also came out with a couple movies then too. Psycho and I think The Birds came out around that time.
Yeah.
I've seen Psycho, and actually I just watched Psycho for the first time maybe a month or so ago, and man, that movie is good. Like Alfred Hitchcock, he's on top of his game at this point. At
He knew
least
suspense, man.
he could do it. He was good at like hiding things from the audience, such as if you've seen Psycho, the whole time. Spoiler alert. Sorry, 80 years ago. His mother's, the dude's mother's dead the whole time, but he's acting as if she's still alive, and he's dressing like her and stuff like this. So you have this idea that maybe it's him, but you're like, but you don't know for sure, because that's how good Alfred Hitchcock was with that suspense stuff and keeping things from you until the right moment. At the very end of the movie, you see the dude's face, but he's dressed up like his mother because his mother's been dead this whole time. It's a pretty neat movie. And like, there's also some crazy twists. Like, there's a girl at the beginning of the movie that meets the owner of the motel, and then he ends up going back and killing her. And you're like, holy crap, I didn't expect her to die so soon. He's like, let's subvert the audience expectations and kill her. And so that's what he did. And he was really good at that with that movie. Good movie. Have y'all seen Psycho?
No.
Unfortunately not.
Oh man,
It's on my forever expanding list of movies I can never find time to watch.
It's like we go on our streaming services. We spend more time, at least I do, it seems like, browsing and adding stuff to my list than actually dedicating time to sit down and watch the show or the movie.
Yeah.
It's like more interactive. I feel like it's more fulfilling, cheap fulfillment to go through Netflix, Hulu, Max, HBO, not formerly HBO Max, just to like the satisfaction of adding that to my list and actually never
just adding it to the list. That's funny.
It's like people that collect Yu-Gi-Oh cards or Pokemon cards that don't actually play the game. They just collect.
Yeah, that's like all these freaking VHS movies I have sitting here. It's like, not the ones behind me, of course, but the ones you can't see. Like, they're just there.
The audience can't see any of them, Justin. They're listening.
I'm talking about you guys. But
yes, we just get a sample of your collection.
Yeah, they have 3 giant bookshelves full of VHS tapes, and I'm not gonna ever watch them, but they look cool. It's like looking at artwork.
Exactly.
That's exactly. I was thinking about the collection, specifically the metal cases that you get.
You mean the buckets? Oh, you're talking about the steel books.
Yeah, the steel books.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking about that. For whatever reason, it popped in my head this afternoon driving home. I was like, that's just art.
Yeah, it is. I mean, like, you look at this right here. It's like looking at a painting, and eventually on this side, you can't. Audience, of course, can't see it, but there's a blank wall next to it. It's just going to be another one of these shelves filled with movies. And I've been trying to go through them and just like watch a movie a night. So far, I'm on Wall-E, which is at the very top.
Out of screen.
Wall-E, yeah, you can't see it. It's at the very top on the very, like, it's maybe the 10th movie in the line. And so Wall-E came out on the Criterion Collection, so I'm gonna rewatch it because it's been a while since I've seen it. But so I'm not very far into this whole one movie a night endeavor. Although I did watch a good movie last night, thanks to Zach, which I guess we can talk about a little bit. Huh, Zach? You want to talk about?
Yeah, let's talk about a little bit. Yeah, the apartment.
If you don't mind, Zach, I would like to start because you've told me what you think about this movie. I want to tell you what I think. So, The Apartment is a movie from 1960. It's starring Jack Lemmon, Shirley MacLaine, and it's basically about a insurance salesman, clerk, whatever he does with insurance, who is not renting out his apartment, but letting executives in his company use the apartments in hopes to get a promotion for dates because they're all cheating on their wives, and so they're bringing.
Let me rephrase that. He's running the America's first Airbnb.
I mean,
I was watching it, and it's like the first half hour of this movie. I'm just like, this is just a day in the life of an Airbnb owner.
Minus the fact that these guys are specifically coming to hook up with their side pieces, right?
Yeah.
And they're not cleaning up after themselves.
Yeah,
he's having to buy it.
They're asking like, "There's no cheese here."
Yeah.
Like, can you get a little wine next time? I'll put it on the tab. And he's like, make sure not to play the music. The neighbors are complaining.
Yeah.
Like, it's like all like this man just runs an Airbnb.
Yeah.
He's a pushover though, and his coworkers have leverage on him, and I feel like he evolves over the course of the movie.
Yeah, he sure does. And like, Yeah, like I said, Jake,
Bud
he's
Baxter.
basically running an Airbnb minus the rules of making sure everything's clean and sticking the dishes in the dishwasher and all this stuff before you go. Um, but then he meets a woman who's like an elevator attendant. I guess they had those back then.
Fran.
Yeah, Fran. Well, Mrs.
Yes.
Kubalik,
Yeah,
played by Shirley MacLaine. She's very cute.
she is.
She's very attractive in this movie.
Great actor.
I was impressed with the character she played as well.
Yeah,
That was
she seemed
I feel like that was a very modern, even today, a very modern take of a
a
woman.
woman. Yeah, I would agree. Like she's not very high up in the company, but she's still independent. She's still, I mean, of course, she falls in love with a married man, but she still seems independent. She can hold her own. She cut off her hair because it was getting on her nerves, and now she thinks it's a mistake. I thought that was cute. She's I really enjoyed her acting. She was very charming to me.
Absolutely. I think she made the movie for me in a lot of ways, just because they explored suicide in early 60s. And I don't think that was really explicitly shown or even talked about in society, or probably the stigma even to this day when it comes to mental health, but especially in the 1960s, late 50s, displaying talking about mental health in such a fashion. And you see during that one scene where those sleeping pills she gets from Bud Baxter's cabinet in the bathroom. And then it's kind of like subtly mentioned. I mean, the music kind of accompanies what she's about to do. And then you see later when Bud brings back that one woman who was with the crazy accent.
Yeah.
And she was kind of hilarious.
What's the big idea?
Yeah. And anyways, like, when he discovers Fran in his bed, he realizes, oh, shoot. And has to call the doctor and everything. And that whole scene was fantastic.
Yeah, I would agree. Like, to be honest with you, I completely forgotten he mentioned a sleeping. I do remember him mentioning a sleeping pill, but I just thought it was like his pills because he was sick, and maybe she realized it was his apartment. I didn't realize she was just like, oh, sleeping pills, I'm gonna take those.
Overdose.
So whenever she was sleeping, I just thought, man, she went to sleep at his house. That's weird, but okay. Because she, I figured she thought maybe it's his apartment. I'll just go to sleep.
So what prompted her to do that? You think, was it the pressure, the realization that
she won't be with that guy?
With that guy,
yeah. She's in love with this guy, and she's like, he's done this to so many women at that place, mind you. Like, he's been doing this for years, sleeping with women at that same company,
including his own secretary.
Yeah, but he still works there. Even as an executive.
The boss.
I mean, I get it, but it's like, come on, dude. Eventually someone's got to take notice and be like, you got to get out of here, But then he does it to Fran, who's just an elevator attendant, and she falls in love with him, of course. And
it's so sad. I mean, it just this woman, she comes across as so strong, but so conflicted, and has a dark past of being used. Yet she kind of yearns for this sense of belonging. But I'm very, I feel bad for her, but also don't at the same time. It's just very,
she
very dark. She has a dark past.
She gives an awesome quote. Like, there was a lot of good quotes in this movie, but there was one that I thought that she delivered that I thought was awesome. She said, "When you're in love with a married man, you shouldn't wear mascara." And I thought, it's so true. I mean, I guess I've never been in love with a married man or wore mascara, but I get what she's trying to say is, like, no matter what happens, you're probably never going to be with that man, so you're probably going to cry a lot. And I thought that was just kind of just got to hit the nail on the head. She also said something else whenever she gave him the mirror and he realized, oh, this is the mirror that Sheldrake had. This is the woman he's seeing, and she's like, aren't you going to look at yourself? And he was like, oh, the mirror, it's broken. And she says, yes, I know. I like it that way. It makes me look the way I feel. I mean,
I remember that.
Starting there, you're like, oh man,
woman.
She's already depressed. There's something like mentally she's upset.
Mhm.
So you kind of get that. And like the thing I like about this movie is I thought I didn't realize it was going to go in the direction it was going, right? I thought it was going to be this comedy, to be honest with you,
Mm-hmm. I did
where
too.
like
Jack Lemmon's known for being a comedian. Just a year before, with Billy Wilder, the director, he did a movie where he played a person in drag, accompanying a touring band, and Marilyn Monroe happens to be in the movie. But it's more of a comedy than the serious tones of The Apartment.
yeah, and so like the whole time, because the description of the movie was like this, guy, he's lending his apartments for his executives to go on dates, and then calamity ensues when his love life whatever becomes he starts having a love life, and I was like, oh man, I thought the whole thing was going to be him trying to keep her away from his apartment, and so it was going to be kind of funny because whatever, but then it just like totally did a 180, threw me for a loop. She tries to kill herself, and then she ends up staying a couple days, and whatever. It's just like it was a great movie that I even changed. So I'm trying to teach film appreciation this fall, and the first movie I was going to have them watch was, of course, Citizen Kane. But then I was like, Citizen Kane to
So
film appreciation.
cliche. I'm just
It is
kidding.
well, it is.
It's
You're right.
but it's so essential too.
It is very essential, but here's the problem, and this is the problem I had when I was taking film was first time watching it, you're not going to see those things that like made Citizen Kane the classic it is today, right? You
We're
just
so used to it already.
Well, we understand what went into making the movie, but people like freshmen and sophomores in college who are taking film appreciation aren't going to understand it. They're going to see it as a movie, and the storyline isn't that great. Not going to lie, it's kind of boring. But once you know what all went into it and you appreciate that, like the movie, it makes the movie that much better. And so like I was like, you know what? I think we'll look at Citizen Kane, but I don't think we'll watch it. And so what I did was I switched it. I'm gonna make them watch The Apartment instead, because it's still like a great movie. And I actually moved it to the second lesson, which is like narrative structure, because I think this movie has great narrative structure. So the first movie they'll watch would be The Apartment.
Awesome. Talk about, what do we think about Bud's like evolution over the course of the movie, from starting as this kind of pushover guy, letting his coworkers use his apartment for having sex with women, and then having the allure of the promotion, and he goes with the flow with allowing his boss to have a set of keys so he could have
free reign,
fun and free reign to do what he wants in his own abode. And then that quote from the doctor, Mr. Dreyfus, something to do with manning up, essentially. And then he, I forgot the exact quote, but eventually uses that on
the brother-in-law.
Yeah, and uses it on Mr. Sheldrake at the end when he in his new office next door, and he's like, "Oh, Mr. Sheldrake, or Mr. Baxter, I think you gave me the wrong keys." And then he says, "No, I didn't. Mr. Sheldrake, I did not." And he goes into his little quote and eventually leaves, and the music accompanies, and it shows that he's this changed man and he's more independent, not going to let people run all over him. I kind of liked his evolution.
Well, you said it. You asked the question and you answered it for us. I did notice, like at the beginning, especially when he got sick and he's like scrambling to change all the dates just so he can go home that night and go to sleep. And I was like, dang, dude, like this guy's like, at first I was like, it's for a promotion. Like, I think I might do the same thing for for an executive. When I say the same thing, like to that effect,
your own
like,
boss.
I would help out my bosses if it meant me getting a promotion. Now, I probably would have a limit. I don't know what that limit is, because that situation's never happened to me. But I like to think, if my bosses needed something from me, I mean, I don't know if I'd give them my apartment. I mean, I might, if they're like, hey, I need a place to, have sex with my mistress. All right. I mean, if that's
not profiting,
I mean, eventually I will, because I'd get a promotion, but it's like,
true.
I wouldn't sell my body, but maybe my apartment, So I don't know. He
I'm
was
learning new things about you, Justin.
I mean, it just depends on the actual situation. It has like I don't know what the boundaries are. I don't know what the situation
Would
would
you
have
kill
to
a
be.
man?
I wouldn't kill a person for
Okay,
a
well, there's
promotion.
one boundary.
Yeah, I wouldn't kill a person. I'd do it, for money. I
You would kill a person for money?
No, I mean I'd help out a boss for money.
Yeah, I think one of the turning points for Bud was when he saw the broken mirror
Well, realize it was her.
yeah,
He realized,
and then he got all depressed, and his mood really changed. I felt like, and then getting stood up by Fran, and I love that scene at the Chinese restaurant because when Sheldrake and Fran walk in, you have the Chinese pianist, and he's playing one of the motifs that you hear throughout the movie. I don't know what you call that technically, but I like that's yeah. Well, how they include it, like actually being played in that universe.
Yeah,
but yeah,
sound.
That's cool. I mean, I thought that was pretty awesome, and that whole sentence, the dialogue between Sheldrake and Fran from the Chinese restaurant scene to when they think they go back to the Chinese restaurant for the New Year's celebration. The whole buildup was so wonderful, and they sing, and then
she turns around and she's gone.
She's gone.
Well, one thing I like and don't like about what's his face Baxter is that he's like, I don't know if he's a good person or a stupid person, because he's covering not only for Fran, but he covers for Sheldrake. He makes himself look like the bad guy. Even to her brother-in-law, he's like, who is she? Whatever. He's like, well, who else? It's like, it's me. And then he gets punched in the face. It's like he's doing all this for her. I don't know. It's kind of crazy. His logic.
He's in an odd situation.
He's a bit foolish.
Yeah, he is a bit foolish.
Opinion.
Like, he's a good person, but it's like, dude, you can be too much of a good person. Like, you still need to stick up for yourself. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. It was just like, I don't know how to explain it, but it was very, it was very interesting to watch that you're like, oh, idiot,
And remember that dramatic run from the Chinese restaurant to Bud's.
Oh yeah,
at the very end. We've seen that type of run before in countless movies, and then I love it when she walks in, she runs in, and hears what she probably thinks is a gunshot, and because he had mentioned that he had tried to kill himself.
Well, he also has a gun. We saw the gun.
We saw the gun, but and it happened to be champagne. Like, that whole sequence was amazing to me.
Well, here's the thing: is when I saw it was champagne, I thought, champagne does not sound like a gunshot. It sounds like something that's been pressurized that pops out. Like, it's not. They don't sound remotely the same. But it sounded like a gunshot. And she freaked out, and I thought it was a gunshot. And I was like, okay, there's no way he killed himself. Like, in my head, I was like, there's no way he's dead. But
he was about to move, wasn't he?
Yeah, and I was like, maybe he accidentally shot off the gun, but then it turned out to be champagne. I was like, I don't believe that was champagne. I mean, I do believe it was champagne. I don't believe that if I were out there, I'd be like, that was not champagne. That was a freaking gunshot, Yeah,
but the wise guy, kind of the man of wisdom of this movie, I think, was the neighbor, the doctor. Yeah.
So was Mrs. Drive.
Oh, she was great. She was hilarious.
She was funny. She's still like, even though she hates him, she's like, I'll make her something to eat.
And remember this kind of the slight, somewhat subtle, but I think if you know what they're talking about as an adult, you can get it. Like, he's like, basically complimenting Bud's sexual expertise, prowess.
He's like, when you die, donate your body to science.
Oh yeah. And then he kept saying
he walks out with the giant trash can just filled to the brim with alcohol, which of course his executives are drinking. But as far as the doctors, he's like, he's got this massive thing of alcohol. He's hearing him make love every night.
He's gonna die soon.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm still gonna be alive when you're dead, so donate your body to science. And then he does. He's like, okay, I will. And then I like that he mentions they're really good at callbacks in this movie. One of them being like, he's going to donate his body to science, and he mentions that a couple times in the movie. And then also they kept saying, like, they were adding the word wise to a lot of stuff.
Percentage wise.
Yeah, percentage wise and cookie wise. That's how it crumbles, cookie wise. And I thought that was kind of funny. And so they did a lot of cool, like, little jokes that weren't jokes, but they were jokes, and
Mhm.
then adding the whys, and then
The Wise got a little excessive for me, but
yeah, it did like
I
after
think
like the
it was good, but it was excessive. But I think it was also there for the purpose because it was just showing like how shallow all these people are. It's almost like an extent to that in like you would think modern films would be like American Psycho. They don't really know what to talk about. They don't know how to actually communicate, and they just want to sound smart. And so they ramble off nonsense and like that's the way it is, cookie wise, because that's sounds smart.
that's the
Mhm.
way it crumbles, cookie wise. It's so funny. And then she mentions not being able to spell, and she's like, "I'd spell it out for you, but I can't spell." And then he mentions something about not being able to spell. So they were really good at like bringing certain like sayings that they had spat off back a few times over. It was kind of neat.
Absolutely.
It was
I love a good
I
bit.
really liked the writing in this movie. And to me like yeah, like you were saying earlier, Zach, it's kind of taking film and kind of almost flipping it on its head where it's experimenting with newer concepts like suicide and stuff like that as opposed to
Adultery.
and adultery and sex, just having sex in general, because back in the 50s, maybe even barely back in 10 years ago, before that, like it probably wouldn't have mentioned it as much. But 1960, boom, the apartment. Let's talk about sex. Let's talk about alcohol. Let's talk about adultery and suicide.
I think people, when they watch a movie, they want to feel something, and they could perhaps connect and relate to what they see on film. And I
To
feel like
those
the
real
apartment,
things.
yeah,
Those
the
very real
apartment,
things.
while it had the comedy flair to it, it also had these serious themes. And for a lot of people, I bet they had conversations about
Like
the
we are.
movie. Yeah, like we are, and relating to the mental health or the adultery, or they know someone at work that's taking
Sleeping.
advantage of their coworkers.
Oh yeah.
Perhaps, I mean, it happens to this day.
Yeah,
Uh,
we're normal now.
but quickly, I wanted to the ending scene. Do you think they get together? What do you think at the end? Because remember, I love you, Fran, and she kind of just like dealing the cards, and he's like, "Shut up and deal," and then the movie ends. I feel like uh, does it matter? I think he's on his path to uh, getting with her. Yeah.
Mhm. I would agree. Like it's kind of like the Han Solo Leia thing, where she's like, "I love you," and he's like, "I know," but he really loves her. Especially in the sequels. Now that they've had a kid, you know what I mean. But he's got to had to have loved her sometime, or they just accidentally had a kid, which is also very possible. Um, so yeah, I think at the end, she loves him. She's just kind of jerking him around. No pun intended. Let's play cards.
Let's play cards. I feel like this would be a great uh, live theater, like a stage play.
Ah,
I
Yeah,
think would make a good stage play. You don't need too many sets. I think you could rotate them as some sets are rotational, but have an office, have a Baxter apartment, and then maybe a Chinese restaurant, and that's all you need.
let's do it.
Let's do it.
There is a cool piece of trivia I wanted to share with you about this movie. To create the effect of a vast sea of faces laboring grimly and impersonally at their desk in a huge insurance company office, designers Alex Troner and Edward G. Maybe Trainer and Edward G. Boyle devised an interesting technique. Full-size actors sat at the desk in the front, and children dressed in suits were used at tiny desks toward the rear,
Wow.
followed by even smaller desks and cutout figures operated by wires. It gave the effect of a much larger space that could have been achieved in a limited studio space. I thought that was interesting.
that's cool.
Yeah, it reminded me of like Citizen Kane in the scene where he's giving that speech, and
Yeah.
it's basically just a huge matte painting with just him, and then you have the pictures of heads with holes in it and lights shining through to make this seem like they're moving. It's a very innovative technique to kind of give the illusion of like this crowded room, and they did a good job, I thought, because I remember looking at that scene at the very beginning of the apartment and thinking like it was like this giant room full of insurance people.
I wondered how they got so many people, like so many extras
Yeah,
for a movie at that time.
yeah, and so apparently they used kids. So I thought that was
That's cool.
interesting. People tapping
they get
away at their
paid?
adding machines.
They get paid. Those
No.
children.
labor, baby.
I mean, they probably did. Probably not very much, but I bet they got something. So anyway, The Apartment. If you haven't seen it, watch it.
Go see it.
Good.
Oh yeah,
Good movie.
very.
What
good
other
movie.
movies from the 60s?
And it won.
you
I think you
guys?
probably maybe mentioned it already, but it won the best picture of that year.
Oh, you're talking about The Apartment.
2001?
Oh yeah, I thought you were talking about The Apartment. Did The Apartment win a
It won best picture.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's what I thought. Best
But it
picture.
wasn't surprisingly. I didn't see in that list that Jake you sent earlier.
Well, I think this is
Apartment.
just
Oh, The
movies that.
Apartment?
Yeah, maybe
it's
it's further
in there.
down there. Oh, is
Yeah,
it?
it's in this list. It's the number 8. That's not based off any awards. It's just based off of the IMDb like popularity. So that's
But
just
still,
you-
I'm still surprised. I mean, for best
Oh.
picture, you think it'd be higher up there in popularity?
I mean, it's in the top 10.
Is it? I missed it then.
Feature film released
I
between.
wasn't
1960.
surprised. I wasn't surprised to see 2001: A Space Odyssey.
I don't see it in the top 10. I see Valley of the Dolls, 2001, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, Psycho, Long Day's Journey into Night, The Sound of Music, The Longest Day, On Her Majesty's Secret Service, Once Upon a Time in the West, and The Great
Yeah.
Imposter. Those are the top 10 I see on the list you sent. Hang on. I could have.
I'll send you another one.
Now I know that. Oh, here's the top 100 movies of the 1960s.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at right now.
Yeah, that's number 8. Okay,
Yeah,
maybe I was looking at a different list than what you sent. My bad. That's number
Anyhow, lots of good movies in the 60s. One of my favorites from the 60s is The Great Escape. Have you gentlemen ever seen that?
No.
No, I've not.
It is a great movie. It tells the story based off a true story of Allied prisoners in World War II building a escape tunnel out from underneath a German POW camp. So it's American
Wow.
soldiers in POW camp, and the first half. It's really interesting because the first half is almost played for like comedy. It's like, the scrappy United States soldiers, like outwitting the German guards and building their tunnel and stuff. And then the second half is when it actually happens, and it's like a hard switch from like a comedy to like an action, almost suspense, because now they're being chased, right? They escaped, and now they're being chased, and they're having to cut through checkpoints and land, and it's just a fantastic movie. It's got Steve McQueen as one of the titular characters, Hiltz the Cooler King. And he has this great motif throughout that movie where he has like a tennis ball, and he keeps getting in trouble, and he just takes a ball in there with him, and he just bounces the ball against essentially what do they call it? Like
A wall? Just kidding.
what do they call it? Isolated, like an isolation tank, essentially,
Oh,
in there. And that's like a motif, the bouncing of the ball against the isolation tank.
Wow. And the dude from Jurassic Park is in it. Richard Attenborough.
But you might, even if you haven't seen The Great Escape, you will probably recognize it if you've watched Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, because they recreate one of the popular scenes in that movie using Leonardo DiCaprio. In other words, he's playing the role of Steve McQueen in that. And that's
kind
the
of
scene
vaguely
where
remember.
where he's in a camp and he's smart mouthing a guard. If you saw that, that's the scene from The Great Escape, but it's Leonardo DiCaprio instead of Steve McQueen. So I thought that was
that's a
pretty
neat little callback. Yeah. It's kind of like Shawshank Redemption. Except, Shawshank Redemption came way after that movie. That sounds cool. I guess I need to put it on my ever-growing list. Am I right, Zach?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I haven't seen it.
Can we talk briefly about Godzilla and how it was the era of maybe arguably good and bad monster
we can talk
flicks,
about whatever
kaiju?
you want to.
How do you guys always pull us back to Godzilla, Ninja
because
Turtles, and
Used to go
Batman?
away every
'Cause
era.
I was going to say Godzilla has been around since the 50s. Like after, the first movie, or not the first one, but the 50s movies by the decade, I bet we'll talk about Godzilla for the rest of
Yes.
these episodes.
Remember, have you seen King Kong versus Godzilla in 1962? It's the first time we see two of the
King Kong.
biggest, most popular monstrous fight, and then and it ends on a somewhat ambiguous note. You hear Godzilla roar, and then but you see King Kong.
Yeah, we never know.
Going into the distance.
We don't know who wins. It's just kind of a.
I mean, they make more King Kong movies, so obviously not King Kong, bringing Godzilla movies. So obviously,
Godzilla.
This was a Toho movies, so I feel like the Japanese they didn't want to piss off anyone exactly, any one audience.
Yeah, Godzilla comes back a lot. Like Godzilla does a lot of dying and coming back, or they just completely reboot the series, like with every new reiteration or whatever, you know.
But one of the Godzilla movies that actually unfortunately is 1971, but I feel like I was talking about psychedelic elements earlier at the intro of the podcast, but Godzilla versus Hedorah, or the other title, Godzilla versus the Spog Monster. It's basically a big message, say, don't pollute the earth. And the movie starts off with this strange LCD trip montage of a woman singing God say or something say it's called Save the Earth, and it's a pretty catchy tune, the American and the Japanese versions of the song. But you have like a bunch of like people with fish masks on, and you see a bunch of dead fish in an ocean, and it's probably real archive footage of dead sea life, and it's like, what am I watching? I thought I'm watching a Godzilla movie, and then eventually gets past the heavy political messaging, carries on to a normal Godzilla film.
Save it for the next one. Talk about it in the 70s when we get there. Can't wait till we get to the 70s, man. A lot of good movies in the 70s.
And then briefly, 1969, the very short Godzilla meets Bambi. I don't know if you've seen. It's a
never heard of it.
Black and white, looks like very hand-drawn style, and you just got to check it out on YouTube.
I don't have to do anything.
1969.
Don't tell me what to do.
I know you don't know who wins. I'm not going to spoil it.
Okay, thank you. I guess the next movie I would like to talk about briefly, we'll start with Night of the Living Dead, which I've seen.
You stole it from me.
Oh, I'm sorry. Here, you can talk about the actual movie. The only time I saw it.
What is that? Zombies?
Yeah. The only time I saw it was I was watching. So there's this thing called Mystery Science Theater 3000, right? And it's
you watched
show.
It through Mystery
Just hang
Theater
on
3000?
a second. My goodness.
What?
Hang on.
Oh.
It wasn't Mystery Science Theater 3000. It was the same people who made Mystery Science Theater, but they do a live show called Riff Tracks where they do it live, but I couldn't see it live, so I had to see the live version in theaters. And so we went to a theater to see it. And it was really cool. But unfortunately, that's the only time I've seen Night of the Living Dead. But the good thing about a lot of those is, like, even though they're making jokes over it, you could still understand the story and what's going on. So I thought the ending was pretty cool. So I'll save that one for you, Jake. I didn't want to talk too much about it anyway.
No, you're fine. It was just like George A. Romero's Night of the Living Dead was a bomb in theaters, because it was originally shown. No one expected it to be what it was. It was a little throwaway movie that was originally shown as a twofer, these films, and the other one was like Doctor Who Night of the Daleks. So you had this what was supposed to be the blockbuster, right? And then you had this little scrappy quote unquote horror movie about zombies or something like that. And it shook everything up because the zombies that we know today, like think of The Walking Dead, think of any zombie in popular media, is all based off of Night of the Living Dead. George A. Romero introduced this genre of zombie that we consider the quintessential zombie today. Oh. They didn't have that before Night of the Living Dead. And horror movies also were not really horror movies, right? They were date night movies. They would go and they would not really be that scary, but it would give the ladies an excuse to snuggle up against their man and pretend that they're scared and stuff. And so you had all these couples going on date night, and they're going to watch this fun science fiction movie, and then they're going to watch this little horror movie. And it's not scary to us necessarily now, but at the time there hadn't been anything like this.
Right.
And so it was legitimately scary to the folks in 1960s.
So they really had to cuddle up.
Yeah, and it legitimately both changed the the genre of zombies as we know it, and the way that we started producing horror films in general. Plus, on top of all that, dear listener, if you want to see it, it's the Night of the Living Dead. It came out in 1968.
68.
You can watch it online. It's available for free on YouTube because it's
Sweet.
entered into the film archives, and so it's out of copyright. And it's on
Oh, that's good to
YouTube.
know.
The full thing is free on YouTube, and it's also available on the Internet Archive, which
That's
is
it.
another
I'm
great
filing a
resource.
copyright claim on YouTube and reporting it. Just kidding.
Man, you no, it's on the Internet Archive, and also
Internet Archive. There we go.
yeah, it's on the Internet Archive,
Oh.
and the remake, the 1990 version, which I haven't seen, is also on the Internet Archive. So you can watch the original 1968 Night of the Living Dead, and then you can watch the remake of it, the 1990 version, also
Yeah,
for
here
free
it is.
online.
Yeah, one
It's
thing
super cool.
I liked about it too is I just remembered the lead character's black, so that was cool. And that's something I can actually use at school. I always try to look for like movies that kind of did something different and used minority actors, non-white actors in lead roles or
Prominent
women.
roles, yeah.
Yeah,
'Cause
and so-
originally, like minority actors played the subservient characters
Yeah.
and had dialogue that was very much a caricature of the way that they speak.
that the way they speak or the way white people saw them. And so it's
Sadly,
interesting
yeah.
to, this, I mean, granted, spoiler alert, something happens to the guy at the end, but it's not like it was a good ending regardless.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a cool movie. I need to rewatch that without the comedy in the background.
If you watch the whole like trilogy, and he's made more and smaller ones between like half of his career is essentially building off of this, Night of the Living Dead universe.
Yeah.
But if you watch the trilogy, Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, and Day of the Dead, that is essentially his trilogy, the quintessential Living Dead trilogy. And he is political throughout all of it. So like the Night of the Living Dead, as you know, put minority characters in lead roles because you have the black man and then also the woman. Both at the time were considered lesser.
Totally.
And then Dawn of the Dead switches this up entirely, and it places it's like after it's kind of ramped up, and essentially takes place in an underground bunker. The entire movie takes place in an underground bunker between in a research facility where a group of scientists and a group of military personnel are studying the zombies. So you have like the science researchers and then the military detail and how they butt heads and how they want to deal with the situation. And I'm not going to spoil it, but it's very much a pointed motif of the difference between like education and military might. And then Day of the Dead continues those kind of themes further. So like it's the whole trilogy is a pointed message, but it's all wrapped up in this great lore and universe of these living dead.
So
Are the Russians mentioned at all? I'm curious in the movie.
I mean, I'll be honest with you, like maybe, but it really wasn't the point of it. The point was the strife between the researchers and the military members, just kind of like the two different viewpoints of solving a problem.
So the movie you just described with the scientists and stuff is Day of the Dead, came out in 1985. The one before that was Dawn of the Dead, which was the one in the mall.
Oh, you're right. I got them mixed up.
That's
a video game too.
Absolutely right.
Yeah, I was like looking at
Dawn of the Dead was like full up shooter action
in the mall, and they actually made a 2004 remake of that movie as well. I don't know about Day of the Dead. I assume is there a remake of Day of the Dead?
Yes, there is.
That's funny. So there's
Yeah,
a remake
he's
for all
like
three of them.
remade all of them, and
Yeah.
he's made another one since that. I think he's made one called like Land of the Dead,
Oh, really?
or something like that,
I think I've seen that
or
before. Land
Survival of the
of the
Dead.
Dead. Hang on, look it up. Oh wait, here's okay. So there is a Land of the Dead. George A. Romero's. I saw that in theaters. It's Land of the Dead. Came out in 2005. I don't know if it's a remake. I doubt it's a remake. Huh? Do you
Yeah,
know?
no, I'm not sure.
I
It's a
don't
remake
think
for
it.
everything
But
these
thank you for that
days.
correction, Justin. I
You're
appreciate
welcome.
that.
Well, I was like, I should probably say something because that you were
Yeah,
like describing it,
I
and
got
I was
those two
like,
mixed.
wait a minute, because I was looking at all three. So, Land of the Dead, living dead have taken over the world, and the last humans lived in a walled city to protect themselves as they come to grips with the situation. George A. Romero. That's funny. I saw that movie in theaters. Oh man, that was a long time ago. Golly, 2005. I need to rewatch all these movies now. Oh my god.
Yeah, I was like, I go to his IMDb, and like every other credit is something
Of the Dead.
of the dead.
Yeah, that's funny.
Of the Dead.
Okay. If you guys don't mind, I would like to talk about another movie from the
Go for it.
60s. And I mentioned it in our Facebook group. It's called David and Lisa. It was part of our curriculum when I taught high school, and I don't really remember why. Oh, it was because I had a lot of like we were talking about point of view shots and stuff. And so I had a lot of that in there, but if you watch the movie, it's like a very like it's almost like watching a psychiatric case on TV, which we've seen several of those movies. But this movie was from 1962, and it was very interesting to see that from back then because there's so many interpretations you can make for this movie. And my friend who was going to school for counseling, I was like, dude, you need to watch this movie. Like, if you like watching things that like about psychiatric, cases and whatever like mental health and stuff, this is a good movie. So the movie's about teenager David Clemens develops a hysterical fear that he will die if he comes into physical contact with another person. So if you touch him, he freaks out. Perturbed, David's overbearing mother places him in a home for mentally disturbed young people. That's where he meets Lisa. And she's a teenager as well, but she has a dissociative identity disorder where she believes she is like, a teenager named Muriel, but she also believes that she is a little girl named Lisa. And her persona that she uses for most of the movie is Lisa throughout. So you kind of watch these two, their relationship develop throughout and how they start, trusting each other and you see like the issues that they have within themselves throughout the movie as well. And it's a very interesting movie if you guys haven't seen it. Which I assume you haven't. Have you guys seen it?
I have not. It sounds interesting.
Yeah, it was an independent movie back then, which there wasn't very much of. It was mostly studio movies, right? But we kind of start seeing this wave of independent movies come out. This was one of them. It was a nominee for best director and nominee for best writing. So I don't know. It's very very interesting take on it. Even the thing says David and Lisa, an unusual love story. So,
what was interesting about the cinematography?
Well, it's in black and white. A lot of point of view shots where, like, there's a scene where it's like a statue. They go to the mall. I think it's like a statue. It's like a statue of a family or something. And so she like crawls up into the statue, right? Because she has no family. And it was a really cool thing. It is actually one of the high schoolers that I taught pointed it out. And I said, what do you, because it was like a top down shot of her laying in the arms. Jake's microphone came off. Her like laying in the
I'm
arms.
glad
of
I had that on mute.
Yeah, thank God. We would have all heard it and laughed at you. So it was top down shot of her laying in the arms of this family, right? Because she like yearns for family, and I was like, so what do you guys think about this shot? And one of them was like, well, it's kind of like God is looking down on her, and I'm like, huh? I was like, I didn't even think about that. So it was a very interesting take that I hadn't even thought of from a high schooler. I think the cinematography is basic cinematography minus some really cool point of view shots, like when David first walks into the mental hospital, he like looks around, but it's first person, and like
that's cool.
yeah, is he looks around in first person, and he kind of, there's a staircase right in front of the door, and when he passes, there's nothing. He comes back and Lisa's there, but she's not like standing. She's like ducked behind the railing to where you can't really see her, but she's kind of peeking over it. It's very it's very cool, like some cool shots in there. And it's in black and white, but it's a very interesting take on what two people with mental health issues, might a relationship between them two might be, because they come to go to, she kind of initiates the relationship as Lisa, of course, um, and they kind of keep talking and talking until they finally trust each other. So yeah,
So is he at a facility for the mentally insane, or is it different?
it's just like, it's almost like the way it, mentally disturbed is what it
Mentally
says. I don't,
disturbed?
it's
Because
not
I feel
really
like in this,
insane.
I feel like in this decade there was big stigma around the quote unquote crazy people, and they would send them to places and they get their brains operated on.
Yeah, no, it wasn't like that. It was more
Okay.
just like a place where they can, and it's like a safe spot or a safe place for them, but they also, get therapy and stuff like that. Like he has a few meetings with his therapist that you see, but then they go out, and that's just kind of the scene where she has the little situation with the statue, and but like people can see them, not the people that aren't in the facilities, just like normal passerbyers, and they're calling them crazy and stuff. And so you kind of see that side of it too, is how they're treated when they're outside of the place. So it's I don't know, it's super interesting movie. Like I was like, when I first saw it, like saw that was the movie on the curriculum. I was like, what is this movie? And so I asked another teacher, and she's like, oh, it's okay. And I was like, okay, great. And so I still made him watch it, and I was like, dude, this movie is more than okay, at least to me. Like if you watch it multiple times, like I had to, and not only had to watch it, but I had to learn it and study it because I was teaching it to students. And so, and that's kind of how I, you know, had a more of an appreciation for Citizen Kane and The Wizard of Oz and stuff like that, where like, yeah, they're great movies, but once you study them and stuff, and you have to teach them, that appreciation grows a lot more. And that's kind of what happened with David and Lisa. I was able to have a more of an appreciation. You might watch it and think this is stupid, but I don't know. I challenge you to watch it and tell me what you think.
I should add it to my long list.
Your list of ever-growing movies.
Yeah.
Um,
I want to touch briefly on just a minute, how 1961 is when the U.S. first had an astronaut in space, and then 1969 is when we had the moon landing. And during this period, we had several movies, sci-fi, and some more serious than others, that dealt with people in space. And Marooned comes to mind. I think I mentioned this one a while back. And stars Gregory Peck. You guys know who that is. He stars in it. And it's explanatory. Astronauts that get marooned in space, just outside Earth's orbit, and it's quite emotional. It kind of starts out as a political, kind of mundane drama about how these scientists are going to achieve their mission in space, but once they eventually get to space, they end up having some technical difficulties with the ship, and they're unable to come back safely, and they're essentially trapped. They're marooned. And there's this one compilation of scenes toward the end where you see astronauts Zoom calling essentially with their loved ones who are I'm assuming in Texas, Houston, and they're saying their last words and to each other before that inevitable happens. But I just felt like it was a movie that it's kind of dry, but once it gets toward the space bits and the emotional parts toward the end, it's where the acting prowess, I feel like, is on full display. But 1969's Marooned is
so
great acting by Gregory Peck, among others.
Question: Did they ended up staying in the ship for like a billion years? Billion, I'm exaggerating, and then come back to Earth, where the Earth has been run by apes?
I think that's
That's 1968.
668.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm just kidding.
that's another
Planet
one. Yeah.
is.
That's another one. Another one that's space themed is the most popular sci-fi movie ever, 2001: A Space Odyssey.
So can I be honest? I've only
Mr.
seen
Kubrick.
maybe half of that before I got bored.
See, that's interesting because that's what I've heard from every person that watched it. There's two camps. There's people who adore it and I think it's the best movie that's like ever been made. And then there's the other half who are like, this is the most boring drivel that I've ever had to
Yeah.
sit through.
Well, it was just it. At least throughout what I was watching, it was just like on a ship talking, on a ship talking, and I was like, and then I realized the movie's like over 2 hours long or something, right? Is it?
It's like almost three.
Yeah, and I was like, God, it's like 3 hours in the '60s, and so I don't know. I just stopped
But in
watching it.
space,
But
I take it back.
okay.
It's not 3 hours. It's over here on IMDb is saying it's 149 minutes.
So what is that?
So it's about
2.5 hours?
2.5 hours.
That's fine. Even back then, that was still too long. But I don't know. Maybe I need to study it and teach it, and then I'll appreciate it more. I don't know.
I
it was a
really,
good old
I mean-
Stanley Kubrick movie, right?
Yeah,
it's a Stanley Kubrick. I really enjoyed it.
I'll
of
give it
course-
another shot. I just don't know when.
This is going to sound really pretentious, but it is definitely a thinker film. It's someone who wants
Cerebral.
to-
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's a movie that you need to want to sit down and just stew on it. And it's not
I
particularly
love
like
stew.
a difficult film. Like it doesn't try to philosophize anything too terribly great. It's just like it wants you to sit there and just look at the scene and think about what they're talking about and just kind of mull in the whole situation.
I don't know. The beginning with the apes and how that thing comes down and they end up learning how to use weapons and stuff. Like that is just a scene that I've seen by itself.
Mhm.
And just that part is kind of a thinker. So I
Yeah.
like to think that the rest of the movie, and I don't think it sounds pretentious at all to say it's a thinker. I mean, heck, Stanley Kubrick's all about it.
Absolutely.
And that's just how he is. It's like even the Shining, yeah, is a thinker. Like, so I don't know. I'll sit down and watch it again. I'm sure it's a good movie, but I just was like,
I think another thing
I love
about 2001
Obelisks.
is it's steeped in the aesthetic, right?
I can
Like-
tell by looking at the pictures.
It
It's a
it
visual
almost
spectacle.
feels like an art project more than a movie because they put so much design into the set and the music in the film that I think like if it didn't have the music and it didn't have the set design that it did, the movie wouldn't have worked at all. It's a very slow-paced movie.
Yeah,
But I think the
agree.
whole point, it's almost like an art gallery in a film.
Like
That's
you
what
can
it feels
see,
like.
you can kind of see the pictures and like, yeah, and I enjoy like movies like that are like aesthetically pleasing, like even some
Like
of Wes
Blonde?
like Blonde, Jake, he loves it when we talk about Blonde.
You don't know, like that's such a hard switch from 2001: The Space Odyssey.
We're talking
I
about the
don't know.
visual,
The visuals-
eccentric spectacle.
Yeah, you're just talking about the visuals, and that's
No,
what.
but like here's the difference between Space Odyssey. Like Space Odyssey feels like you're walking through an art museum, looking at still lifes. That's what
Okay.
it is.
and
like you're walking-
Blonde is more like
that's-
you're walking through an art museum after you've taken LSD.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's a completely different. That's what Space
It's
Odyssey
still
feels like.
unusual, though, I feel like.
It is unusual, but it feels like Space Odyssey is a movie made up of, it sounds stupid, it's a movie made up of pictures. In other words, still lifes. Each scene is supposed to be taken almost as if it's an art piece. And you're
Mhm.
supposed to look at it and think about it
And move
and
on.
all about what they're talking about and think about the music that's playing and just kind of like, oh, okay, I get it. And then it moves on to the next scene. That's how the movie plays out.
Well, knowing
love
that
Kubrick.
information, and hearing that might be easier to watch it going into it. I think when I tried to watch it, I had gotten my degree in film, but I wasn't as heavy into like movie watching as I am now. So I don't know. It's possible that I could change my mind. I mean,
Well, I think it gets I think a lot of people get set up for
Greatness.
they get set up to be disappointed because they hear, oh, it's the greatest space odyssey of all time. It's the greatest science fiction. It's a masterpiece. And then they think about the amazing movies that we see today, like Interstellar or Star
Yeah.
Wars or things like that.
Yeah.
And then they turn it on and it's essentially 2.5 hour movies of matte paintings, essentially.
Yeah.
And they're like, what the is this?
People
This is
also
so stupid.
People are also deceived when if you've seen Ad Astra. I think people are expecting something a little bit more faster paced, more engaging. But Ad Astra was kind of a slower film. It's a movie in space. Tommy Lee Jones, the good old Brad Pitt, Liv Tyler, among other actors. But I enjoyed the pacing of that particular space film.
So
I just think if you just go in with the right mindset, it's a much better experience.
But for people that are, but for like casual goers, it's going to be like, what WTF? What am I watching?
Yeah,
And they'll be easily turned off, unfortunately, or fortunately, whatever you want, however you want to view it.
If you want to watch a quote unquote space movie, it's not for you. If you're the kind of person who likes to go through a museum and like look at the paintings, it'll be a great movie for you.
And you like good classical music, you'll love it too. Because the way a staple of Stanley Kubrick, it seems, from I think the two movies I've seen, Doctor Strangelove and 2001: A Space Odyssey, is that he ends his movies with a kind of a mic drop of sorts, with a grand visual, with combining with a great orchestral score or song of the time, lyrical. And I don't know how to pronounce it, but the Richard Strauss's Sprach Zarathustra tune with the timpani and the brass, the grand brass, and you see a massive baby on screen appearing in Earth. It's crazy. And then the way Doctor Strangelove ends, which is kind of talking about the Cold War and the obsession of man when it comes to war and power and competition with the Soviets, anyways, and the dangers of nuclear war, inevitable destruction, essentially. That way that movie ends is in destruction, combined with the ironic song called "We'll Meet Again," and which was a popular song during the World War II era. But when we're talking about bombs and the whole total world destruction, "We'll Meet Again" is kind of a ironic tune to hear as you're seeing a bunch of archival footage of bombs going off. So I like Kubrick's use of music.
So I'm going to say this thing I've been trying to say. There's a theory I have, Jake. I call it the Frozen theory. And I'm sure I've mentioned this on this podcast before, where people hype stuff up so much that when you go to watch it, even though it's good, it's not as good as they made it out to be. And the reason I call it the Frozen theory is because that's what people did with Frozen. Literally, somebody in one of my classes said it was the best Disney movie ever made. And at that point, I had seen Tangled. And when I watched Frozen, I was like, Tangled was way better than this. So
Truth.
When people mention, 2001: A Space Odyssey, oh, it's this great space movie, and it's almost like they're going to be expecting Star Wars type stuff, and it's like, nah. So that's why my friends make fun of me, because they think I don't watch certain things because everybody else likes them, and I'm like, no, it's because everybody else likes them, and they hype it up so much that it makes me not want to watch it, because I'm going to go in there and I'm going to be disappointed because they hyped it up. Like when the Tiger King documentary came out, and I heard all this stuff about it. And then my friend's like, I want to watch the whole thing tonight. And so I was like, all right. And then she's like, oh, wait, you don't like it because other people like it? And I was like, no, I've been hearing about this documentary for the past week and how good it is. And now I'm afraid I'm going to be disappointed. So when I watched it, she was like, oh my God, that was so crazy. I was like, oh, it was okay. And of course they made fun of me for it. I was like, there was really good parts in it, and he is insane. But I don't know. I was just,
he's moving to Fort Smith when he gets out.
If he gets out, when is he getting out? Do we know?
I don't know. But he's like made an official statement. He's moving to Fort Smith, Arkansas.
Oh boy, great.
Gets out. So
okay,
news story.
Yeah, I know.
All the cameras will be there.
So, if y'all have anything else, there is one thing I want to end on. But if you guys want to talk about anything else real quick, you have any other movies you want to mention or anything like that?
I'll just say closing thoughts if we're going to do that. That's fine. About
Okay.
the 60s. I think the 60s is an era of movie making that I want to get more exposure
Acclimated.
to and
Yeah.
acclimated to, and like watch the movies that you recommended or the ones that Jake recommended, that big old list.
Yeah.
But I mean, again, I'm a big music guy, as you know, and I love this kind of somewhat golden age of movie making as we're evolving with society and the cultural shifts. That also is quite appealing to me. And as I mentioned, obviously, The Apartment's probably one of my favorite movies now. I learned about that movie because I was watching one of my favorite shows, Mad Men, and during one of the scenes, they mentioned, "Hey, which movie are we going to see, or which movie is everyone seeing these days?" And they said Apartment. And it's interesting, and I'm sure you guys do it as well when you watch movies or watch TV series, and they mention certain media or songs. It makes you want to go like Google, look on the internet, and learn more about what they just mentioned. Even if it's not so important to what's being talked about in the particular movie or show, but it's like, hey, that seems cool. So thanks to Mad Men, which also takes place in the 60s primarily. And I got to watch the fantastic show.
Yeah. It's funny because I don't have any recent recollection of me doing this, but on The Office again, well, I say again because we were talking about before we started recording for people who are listening. They play Desert Island and talk about their 5 favorite movies or whatever, and Dwight's favorite movie was The Crow, and so because of it, because his favorite movie was The Crow, that my friends actually watched it because that was Dwight's favorite movie, and I just thought that was kind of funny that you mentioned like people who watch things and they hear about things while watching things and they're like, oh, I want to find it out.
Especially books that I see, it doesn't even need to be uttered like vocally, but seeing someone read a particular book that might have some meaning for the particular character that's reading it.
Yeah.
What's interesting is a lot of times when they put that stuff in, when they name drop or add things in, I mean, a lot of times that is intentional. That's something that the writers wanted to put in because it either might contain a motif of the story they're in, or it could be inspired by it, or it could just be something they're like, hey, this is a good, piece of artwork that I want people to do exactly what you did, Zach.
Even if it is like product placement, it can be effective in the story.
Yeah. I'm actually reading a book in which a movie was based off of called I'm Thinking of Ending Things. And we watched the movie, and the movie's
sounds like a dark film.
It's weird. It's very weird, hard to follow sometimes. And I was like, I got to read the book. And so I started reading the book. It's been a minute since I've continued reading it. I need to get back into it, but I started reading it. I've read a good third of it. And so far it's literally just like, it's in the point of view of the main female of the movie, and she goes to meet his parents and things happen, and kind of reminds me of Mother, where like things happen out of nowhere kind of stuff. It's very, very weird, very, very interesting. So,
you like weirder the better.
The weirder the better. And so I was like, I need to read this book. And so basically,
and you don't like cats.
That's weird for a
weird movie. That's objectively a weird movie.
Nah. I mean, yes, you're right. It is weird, but it's weird in a different way that I'm interested in. Like,
Cats Part 2.
It's weird because came out. It's this huge musical that's super popular on Broadway for years. Comes out as a movie and instantly bombs. Right? That's what makes it weird. And like to me, that's not the weird that I'm interested in. Now I'll watch it if someone like Jake makes you watch it. And says, hey, we're going to watch Cats as one of the episodes. I'll watch it. But that's literally the only time I would watch it. Unless a girl was like, oh my God, I want to watch Cats. And if the girl wants to watch Cats,
you'd watch probably pussy to get some.
Gross. But yeah. The point I was trying to make was if a girl wants to watch Cats, then she's probably not a girl I want to be with, is what I was going to say. So I don't know.
You heard it here, folks.
Yeah, don't watch Cats if you're into me. Just kidding. Anyway, so Jake, any final thoughts?
No, I think you guys summed it up pretty nicely. I think there was 70s. A lot of change.
Yeah,
there was change in the 60s. A lot of change in the 60s in the movies, and they started being a lot more experimental and political, and lots of great stuff come out of that decade. So
I tell you. So I found this article, and I'm going to try to blow through it because we have gone over a little bit. This has been an interesting conversation, and it's from Collider.com. 12 movies from the 1960s everyone should see at least once. Can you guess what might be on there?
2001: A Space Odyssey. Sound of Music.
Space Odyssey. Doctor Strange Love.
Okay.
Um,
I'm going to go through all of them. So
Doctor No.
Lawrence of Arabia. Psycho.
Okay. All right. So here's number one is Psycho, 1960. Alfred Hitchcock. If you haven't seen it, Collider suggests you watch it. The Sound of Music is number two.
Ooh. Oh man, we didn't even talk about that.
Yeah, we didn't talk about that, but I've be honest with you, The Sound of Music I've seen a couple times in music class as a kid.
I've seen it too many times,
and I'm just
I've
like,
seen it a ton.
Of course, when I was a kid, I was like, this is dumb, but I did see the play, and the play was really good.
That's
like
cool.
I really
awesome.
enjoyed the play, and that was when I was working at Channel 7, and they gave out free tickets, and so I was like, hey, good idea for a date night, because I was seeing a girl at the time, and so I got tickets and we went, and it was really good. 2001: A Space Odyssey is number 3. Lawrence of Arabia is number 4, which I have not seen. Can you guess what number 5 is?
The Apartment.
No, The Apartment's not on here. Let me
Doctor No.
Strange Love. Planet of the Apes.
To Kill a Mockingbird.
Oh yeah.
Dang. Yeah, it's another one we didn't really.
That's one I've purposely not watched, because Pie in the Sky, Dream Above Dreams, if I ever get a chance to make that movie, because I want to make that movie, I don't want to be influenced by anything.
Yeah, that's
All right, the next one is, anybody want to guess?
cool. Doctor No. James Bond. The first James Bond film.
The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
Yeah.
Clint Eastwood. Okay, the next one?
Lisa and David.
No,
Birds.
that's not on here. The Graduate
Right. Oh, yep.
with Dennis Hoffman. The next one is a movie called Peeping Tom, which I've never heard of. But it's a disturbing psychological thriller so lurid it ruined one of Britain's most esteemed auteurs. Interesting. Peeping Tom is an uncomfortable look at voyeurism that's intrinsic to cinema. Ooh,
That sounds interesting, actually.
It does sound really
Weird.
interesting. Yeah, it's, if a little indirectly, this is one of the best movies about making movies from a master whose career was ended unjustly and far too early. So he got canceled because of this movie, essentially.
Wow.
Cancel culture. 60s.
I'm going to read the rest of this real quick. This is the first ever movie to put the audience in a killer's POV, thus making it arguably the first slasher film. The effect was too much for audience and critics at the time. Wow. Yeah, I need to actually suggest this to my friend. He loves slasher films.
What's it rated?
Oh, Mary Poppins was from the 60s.
What's it rated? I don't know. You'd have to look it up. It doesn't say what it's rated on this list.
Did they say it was too much for society? Did they
It might have
stop
been rated
showing it?
PG,
Yeah.
and it's still too much for society. Okay. Next one is Doctor Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. This is
You
one
guys need to
that's-
watch that one.
Yeah, this is one that's
awesome.
like been on. People have suggested and suggested and suggested, and I just still haven't watched it.
That iconic scene, you've probably seen it in multiple other forms of media where the guy's latched to a bomb and yelping, and it's going down into some Russian field.
Okay.
It's one of those iconic scenes you've probably seen somewhere.
Okay, we got 3 more. You want to guess what the next one is? Try to.
West Side Story.
It is
Mary Poppins.
Bonnie and Clyde.
Oh.
Now remember, this is just from Collider.com, so it's nothing like, it's not a definitive list or anything. But Bonnie and Clyde is number 10. Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway. Okay, so Zach, you've said this several times.
Dr. No.
No, it's actually
Very to
Goldfinger.
Oh,
Yeah, Goldfinger's number 11.
dang. So which Goldfinger what year was that?
1964.
Oh, so it was the second Bond film. Wow.
Yeah,
Interesting.
1963's follow-up from Russia with Love. Oh, wait.
Dr. No is 1962. Was there
No, wait.
a movie in 1963, a
Eon's
James Bond film?
carefully, hang on, crafted Dr. No was an international hit. And 1963's follow-up from Russia with Love was even better. It is now, that's what I just saw, I saw 1963's follow-up. I thought that it meant it came after from Russia with Love, but it didn't.
Christopher Lee, a young Christopher Lee's plays the villain in that movie.
I'm assuming his name is Goldfinger. Not to be confused with Goldmember. Okay.
Doctor No.
Y'all know who Goldmember is, don't you?
No.
Yeah, okay, Austin Powers.
Yeah, it's Austin Powers.
I haven't seen Austin Powers.
His member is gold. His wiener's gold. It happened in an unfortunate schmelting accident.
Melting.
Okay, the last one. Do you want to guess?
West Side Story.
We've talked about this movie.
On this episode?
Yeah.
This current episode. Let's think here. Try to get it correct.
The Great Escape?
No.
That Psycho film that you're talking about? With the
Breakfast
one
at
that you
Tiffany's?
watched?
No, we talked about it in this episode. What did you say? Breakfast at Tiffany's?
Breakfast at
Did we brush on it? Did we elaborate?
No, we elaborated on it.
The Apartment.
No.
No.
Can we tell you?
Yeah.
Yes.
Night of the Living Dead.
Hey.
I was thinking about saying that, but
You should have just said it, Zach.
awesome.
What's going to happen if you're wrong? Nothing. You're in Texas.
Yeah, freedoms are.
All
I don't
right.
think anyone said that combination worse before.
Well, you're welcome. That's why I'm a writer and you're over there. Okay, cool. Well, this is a good conversation, guys. I like these movies by the decades because it starts off kind of slow and then we're like, let's talk about this. And then, blah, 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 blah. So I like talking about the movies that we watched and enjoyed as opposed to trying to talk about the history. Although we can still talk about history, but you notice we didn't really talk about history in this one. We just talked about
we touched on aspects of history and cultural changes. Yeah,
we touched on them. We didn't try to elaborate on them. We could have. I mean, I'm sure we could have, but it was more fun just talking about the movies that we enjoyed from the 60s. So we could think about that going forward, maybe. Oh wait, what is this? We got another list after the other one, the one I just told you about.
No.
10 MCU characters who made the best use of an Infinity Stone. Ooh, interesting.
Skip.
I know.
Everyone's being canceled among the MCU villains these days. It seems for alleged criminal activity.
This has
Yeah,
nothing
I
to do
saw
with the 1960s.
No, it doesn't. Okay, well, we'll move on. All right, well, that'll conclude our discussion on the 1960s. We appreciate you listening to our long-winded discussion of the 1960s. We probably went over a little bit, but that's okay. That's what editing's for, right? So if you enjoyed it, or if you want to leave us a comment, review, or give us an idea for an episode to watch, this is actually our last episode of season 2. So the next episode after this will be season 3, episode 1. So that's good news. Hit us up on anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Google, Spotify, YouTube, or you can hit us up on any social media, so Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. And that will be it for us tonight. So say bye, guys. Don't say bye like I say bye, though, because that's my
Later.
thing.
Later.
All right.
Have a fantastic day.
Bye.